My name's Daniel Northway Frank. I'm the industry director here at the festival. Been here as a volunteer many years ago, and I've been working here. This is my ninth festival, so I encourage you, if you like what you see here, is to come and start volunteering. You could start working here at some point. So I want to thank CBC and CBC Docs, which is our industry series sponsor for this year. So thank you so much for your generous support. We acknowledge the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and give thanks to the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat for the privilege of working and living on their territory. And now we're happy to present to you Vice Connects. Vice Canada is the world's leading youth media company. With its production of critically acclaimed Indigenous content, Rise and Cutoff, to name a few, they provide perhaps the biggest opportunity for youth-engaged storytelling by Indigenous creators to reach a massive global audience. Vice content leads and associate producers in this fireside chat format will inform delegates on their content vision, as well as how, where, and what both Canadian and maybe some international creatives can approach them with. I will leave it at that, and they'll tell you how it works through the Vice systems. So I'd really like to welcome and thank all of our speakers today, and Patrick and Tanya specifically for coming here for the first time and for working with me to bring Vice to our creators today. And I want to also thank our longtime friend and former colleague Michelle Latimer for coming, speaking on several events this year and just about your own experiences with Vice. And to our moderator, Imaginative board member and filmmaker Adam Gunnar-Jones for helping present today's discussion. So without further ado, I invite you all up to the stage and take it away.
This feels so strangely formal compared to other imaginative panels that I've been on through the years.
What were the other ones like that this is so stiff?
Not, well now I feel
I just
awkward.
got here.
No, in the past they've just been in kind of more casual spaces,
Oh,
like
like
not on stage with bright lights and eyes. So yeah, we can all just take a moment to introduce ourselves. My name is Adam Garnett-Jones. I'm a Cree Métis filmmaker from just outside of Edmonton, and I've been in Toronto for about 15 years. I made a feature called Fire Song. It was a closing night film of the festival a couple of years ago, and this is my opportunity to plug because I have the microphone and I'm talking. I have a film that's playing at the Carlton. This is the last night to see it in theaters in Toronto, called Great, Great, Great. I'm also a board member at the festival, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Vice today.
My name is Michelle Latimer. I'm an Algonquin Métis filmmaker. I grew up in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I've lived in Toronto for about 15 years as well. Let me see, I have 2 films at the festival, 2 short films, Nuka, which is playing Saturday morning in front of Mankiller, which was executive produced by Laura Poitras, and Field of Vision. And I have another film called Kiautau, which was actually was directed by 3 Indigenous filmmakers as part of the Maoriland's Native Slam competition this past year. I think we were there in March. And I worked with the reason why I'm here is because I worked with Vice on a series called Rise, which is a series about Indigenous resistance that premiered at Sundance Film Festival in 2017 and has sort of been playing around the world since.
It really has been playing around the world. It's been pretty awesome. I'm Patrick McGuire. I'm the head of content at Vice Canada, so I oversee development for new projects for Viceland, our cable network, and also for our digital documentary stream as well. And I had the distinct pleasure of working with Michelle on Rise as an executive producer.
Hi, I'm Tanya Natchev. I'm executive director of documentaries and digital content at Vice. I worked on Rise as well, and we were so lucky to premiere it at Sundance, and it was a really great experience, and Michelle's been taking it across the world, like you mentioned, even to New Zealand. And where's the next place?
Paris.
Paris, amazing. And before that, I worked at CBC, I worked at CBC News, I worked on the George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight Show, and I used to work at Much Music, doing documentaries and news there.
Excellent. All right, well, let's get things started with a trailer. I think you have, there's like a
So
show reel.
we're going to play our big flashy sizzle reel that'll give you an idea of how the company works to start. And then we're right after going to play the trailer for Rise.
Excellent.
would you describe Vice?
I don't know. Vice is sort of hard to describe.
Vice is many things. Vice is a website, Vice is a magazine, Vice is the bus.
We've got a TV channel.
We have shows on HBO.
It's in your face, in your pocket, on your screen, everywhere.
This is something that's lasting, it's award-winning. It's actually changing the people's lives and the communities that we're talking about.
What we do is take big things, just make everything more relatable to especially young people.
I'm not going to say what Shane says, which is what does he say, the Time Warner of the streets?
We already are the Time Warner of the street.
It's kind of true, though.
My parents want me to be a journalist who affects the world. And Vice has been a platform that I've been able to talk to millions of people about the things that I care about.
We shake things up and make people think about their reality.
If you want to reach a younger audience, hire a younger audience.
Shout out!
When you see something from Vice, it legitimately feels like that's just somebody my age talking to me.
We're not going to be controlled by any sponsorship or corporation. Sorry, ad executives who are watching this. But that's what makes us great, and that's why our brand is valuable. That's why people watch us.
When I saw Obama choose Vice to even begin the conversation around mass incarceration, that inspired me to want to work with Vice.
Is the criminal justice system in America racist? The system tilts in a direction that is unjust.
When I graduated high school, I was like, when I grow up, I just want to be a professional feminist. And I said it as a joke because I was like, haha, it's not a real job. And now I have this opportunity to actually do that.
One of the craziest things I ever made was when I communicated with ISIS militants, and I don't think I could have done that anywhere else but Vice. I don't think anyone else would have trusted a 26-year-old reporter to take on these types of stories.
Vacation is like a blindly cathartic experience for me because I'm like a gay kid from Texas who came from a very religious family. And since then, I've spent my entire life burning them in documentaries.
When I go into these communities and I'm talking to people, people are putting down their guns to stop and talk to me, So when I just stopped looking for the right questions and asked my questions from my heart, that's when the beauty and the magic happened, and I got to go on people's journeys. That's what it's about. And that's when I knew that this was home for me.
I'm more excited about what is going to come out of this organism in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years.
We're building something strong, we're building a new generation.
We're just making it bigger and better.
Our jobs have never been more important.
There's a chance you're going to see something you haven't seen before. So I have no idea what the future holds, but I'm gonna do my job, and I'm gonna have fun doing it, and yeah, fuck everything else.
If sacred land can be taken over by corporations, then none of our indigenous communities are protected, including my own.
People are waking up. People are saying no more.
Society took our land away from us. We need to protect it.
I will stand and fight for this place.
There's no turning back for us.
Despite all of the hatred and genocide, we're still here and we're resilient.
I am not moving till every pipe is removed from the earth.
You cannot change the political system until the people control the land. Until rise!
It's so beautiful. It's really wonderful work. Well, I'd like to start off just by inviting you to talk a little bit about why you're here, why you're at Imaginative. What is it that you think Why is it that Vice wants to connect with Indigenous filmmakers?
So I started at Vice 10 years ago, and when we started in Toronto, there were 4 of us in an office that's now Capital Espresso, which is a good place to get an Americano. It's not necessarily a great place to run a media outlet out of. You know, the first thing we did when we got any kind of budget to do anything really was start looking at Indigenous stories. And you know, as a media outlet in a world where there's a lot of media and a lot of content, we just look for the white spaces and gray zones of you know, subjects that aren't really being covered properly. And we always felt that Indigenous stories were one of them. So, you know, I made a documentary about Aamjiwnaang, a nation beside the Chemical Valley outside of Sarnia. We went up to Nunavut and did some work there. And then, you know, our daily editorial coverage on Vice.com and Vice News, like, often really deals with pipeline resistance movements. We were in Unistoten, unceded land in BC, and made a doc there. So, you know, when we had this opportunity to start a cable network, like, this was I made a slate of like 5 to 6 ideas and sat down with Eddie Moretti, who's the chief creative officer of Vice, works out of New York, and immediately he was like, yes, we have to do that. And then it wasn't even called Rise, it was like one slide on a deck, but that's where we you know, really wanted to start. And you know, also in our political coverage, like, we sat down with Trudeau during the 2015 election. We were the only media outlet pressing him on First Nations water access. So, you know, and then that ended up with us going to Shoal Lake 40 with him last year. So why we're here is to just continue to learn about how to tell these stories in the best way possible with the, you know, most ethical, like, representation, and to build relationships with young filmmakers who can help us tell these stories and to show us stories that we haven't heard of in the country that we want to put on our platform. And so Tanya is going to be at the micro meetings tomorrow. You know, I'm really easy to reach. I'm Patrick at Vice.com. Tanya is Tanya.Natchef at Vice.com. You can just sort of reverse engineer from our names on the thing, and we want to hear from people.
Yeah, and if you want to come afterwards, I'll be here. I'll stick around
Yeah,
if you want
same.
to talk to us. And it's not just directors we're looking for. You know, if you're a researcher or you're an editor or you want to start shooting stuff, you know, we also have an intern program. There's things that you can connect with us, and just, you know, we'll give you our email addresses, and we really want to be accessible.
So it sounds like, I mean, between all of the different platforms and the different kinds of content creators and craftspeople that you're interested in connecting with, it's really broad. So if you could maybe just break it down for us, you know, what does Vice look like? I mean, I know in the reel they say that there's a magazine, and then there's the online stuff, and then there's a TV channel, and I think that it can be a little bit overwhelming as a content creator.
It can be overwhelming internally, so I totally understand. So I mean, you know, the divisions that are really kind of relevant to this conversation are, you know, first of all, our editorial department that on a day-to-day basis is publishing written and visual content on Vice.com and Vice News and Noisy, our music channel. And so we're always looking for Indigenous stories there. Vice News last month did a really great feature package of different First Nations water stories with social videos that we got from different communities who had sent in questions for the Prime Minister, and we, you know, we're pushing the government on where they're at with their 5-year promise. So there's that side of it, basically the journalism side. And then there's the digital production side, which is where Tanya and I are sort of overseeing, and also the television part. So that's basically, you know, putting platform aside, whether it ends up on the internet or a cable channel, that's our documentary division. So, you know, we're looking for series ideas, and we're also looking for one-offs. So really, it's just, do you have a story? And you don't need to say, you know, you don't even need to come in and understand necessarily if it's a 5,000 word article or if it's a 22-minute documentary, if it's an 8 times 1, did we do 10 or 8? We did 8. We did 8 times 1 hour television series. So we'll help with that, and that's what we do. We just want to hear from people that have a great story to tell, have an interesting perspective, and have skills they want to, you know, bring to the table. And we have a lot of conversations that are very open-ended to start, you know. Maybe you could speak a bit more to that side.
Even our TV series, some of them, like, it'll be about food, like Dead Set on Life with Maddie Matheson, but we'll go to a Maori community, or we'll go to, you know, to Winnipeg or wherever. So we're open to stories that you might not think, oh, that doesn't fit into a real documentary format, but it could fit into something else, a cooking show or whatever. So don't just think it's about documentary series.
Yeah, we're also...
It doesn't have to be always heavy.
Yeah, exactly. We're not just looking for, you know, obviously a huge part of our brand is investigative journalistic work and calling attention to underreported social issues. But we also like to have fun. We also are a lifestyle brand. Viceland has a lot of like fun lifestyle programming, and so we're always looking for the positive and the cultural and the artistic side of things as well.
That's great. And so for somebody who's interested in getting in touch with Vice, should they be doing a bunch of research to make sure that they are going to the right person? Or if they came to you, would you point them toward the right person?
We'll put you in touch with the right person.
We operate the switchboard, so it'll just get bounced around. But what is important is to sort of, if you do have an idea, just look around, see if it's been covered before, see if Vice has done something on it before. You know, what we're really looking for is that, oh, I didn't know that was a thing moment. You know, like it's that, wow, that's actually happening. Like, if you can surprise us, then you've like, that's 75% of the work kind of thing. So that's really where it should start. So just sort of researching the uniqueness of your idea versus the who do I need to talk to part.
And if you can get access, because that's a really big part of Vice, and what you can see is that we have access, it's authentic, and that we can get in and tell those stories that no one is covering right now.
I know that often filmmakers have a difficult time collaborating with producers and broadcasters and that kind of thing. So, and just kind of butting heads over what the content is going to look like, what the messaging is going to look like, particularly in Indigenous communities and in Indigenous stories. So Michelle, can you talk a little bit about what that process was like for you? I guess the editorial process and that creative process.
Yeah, so Rise wasn't something that I originated. It was an idea that Eddie had, and they'd sort of headhunted me, and I'd gone through a series of interviews. I think in my second interview I met you, Tanya. And when I heard about what the show was, I just in my heart said, "Oh, I gotta be on the show. Like, I'm the person for the show." And I just
and you were up for another gig before that.
Actually, it's really funny you say that, because Vice had actually hired me for another show, and I was waiting for Rise to be to go. It hadn't been started production yet, and I remember calling the showrunner and being like, "Listen, I really want to do Rise, but I'm gonna start on Monday on this other show for Vice. So which one do you want me on?" And he's like, "Wait, we want you on for Rise." And then everything.
What were we gonna put you on?
Payday.
Oh man. That would
have been great too.
Payday was great. Payday was great, but it was just really funny the way it all worked out. And I guess my lesson to what I would like to say to you guys in the audience is, like, when you know something feels right, just go after it. Go after it with all your passion, with all your heart, because I feel like I really did that, and it paid off, you know. And so I started working on Rise as a director and a writer. And then not too long into the process, I became the showrunner for the series. And that was a really amazing opportunity. And it really resonated for me, the first trailer we saw, when a guy said, "Who's going to let a 26-year-old take over?" Like, at my age and my experience level, it would have maybe taken me another 10 years to showrun a show like Rise at any other network. But Vice doesn't really have an ageist attitude about those things. You can be 22, and if you have an awesome idea and you have talent, you're going to have those opportunities. And I think that that's something that Vice really offers that's special and unlike anywhere else. So that was really refreshing for me. You know, obviously being a director or being a showrunner, you have a lot of editorial say in the kind of content you're producing. So that was amazing, because up until that point, I'd really, outside of doing my own auteur work, my own films, I had really essentially been asked to sort of contribute as associate producer or contribute as a consultant. But to actually helm a show like Rise was incredibly empowering. And I think our people need to be leading more of our stories. So that was huge. What else can I say? You know, Standing Rock popped off about halfway through Rise, and no one could have foreseen what that was going to be politically and socially. And the amazing thing, too, is because Vice is a production company and a broadcaster, which is rare, right? Because a lot of times you're just working with a broadcaster and then you are working with a separate production company. But in this case, they can produce as a studio, but also show things on their channel. So they were able to say, you know what? I know we had another film that we were going to do, but Standing Rock is the next biggest thing, and we got to get on there. And we were in there within moments, really, when everything started to happening. We were on planes, we were back, and then we made 2 films in Standing Rock, and there was only supposed to be 1. So it's that kind of versatility and that kind of ability to have the resources behind you to act fast. Sometimes I say to filmmakers, you know, if I did this independently, and trust me, I've been working independently with my own production company for years, if I was to do this series, 8 one-hour documentaries, it would have probably taken me about 20 years, 16 to 20 years to do that on my own, to fund each one, to go out and shoot. And we made Rise in a little under a year and a half. So I'm really proud of that. Yeah, it killed us, but we did it, and I'm really proud of that.
Where are these edits? Oh, Michelle's at Standing Rock again. Oh, okay. Well, I hope she's doing a good job. And you were. But I remember that month and a half where you're like, is Michelle around? No, she's at Standing Rock. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But we were able to pivot and do that, and because Michelle was so passionate about it and really sold it to us. It wasn't like, oh, okay, we'll do it. No, she said, this is what we need to do. This is something that's happened that hasn't happened in decades, and we need to be there. And I remember being on vacation, you calling me, and it's like, it's happening still. I need to go. And it's like, right, let's do it.
Oh yeah, we weren't skeptical. That's for
no,
sure.
and
Yeah.
you know,
And I
we
think
weren't.
most broadcasters would be. I think most broadcasters would say, okay, you have enough for a 1 hour story, get in, get out, deliver, you're done.
We also have a budget too, right? We have to work within, and so we might have gone over on that
We
one.
definitely went over.
But we also created the only living history document of Standing Rock that to come out immediately after the standoff. And to this day, we are the key document of that standoff. And so that's huge. We might have seen things with Al Jazeera, and we might see documentaries come out probably this year in the festival circuit. But we literally released our documentary on the day Trump was inaugurated as president in Sundance Film Festival. So, that's a historical moment. And I think that those kinds of things as a filmmaker come around once or maybe twice in a lifetime.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
It's a testament to Michelle and the team who worked on it and believed in it and kept pushing. And they pushed us, and we made those decisions to change. And because usually you don't do 2 1 hours on the same subject in a series. But she told us this is a moment in time, and we cannot pass this by.
For sure. That subject is a framework to talk about so many different things that are happening all over. You mentioned producers a little bit, and I know that that's something we wanted to talk about. Is how does Vice work with independent producers, or do you work with independent producers as well, or do you do everything in-house?
We absolutely do. So we are a production studio. We're not technically a broadcaster. We just have a TV channel. So basically, like...
It's the easiest way to talk about what you are.
I know, it makes total sense, right? But what that means is that, so when independent producers come and pitch us, like, we own content. That's our whole business model. So we're not necessarily saying, okay, well, you might go to a broadcaster who you'll pitch something and it's like, we'll give you this much financing, you have to complete this financing, and then we'll take a window or whatever. Like, if we get an idea we like, we'll option it and we'll develop it with you, and we'll give you legal service and accounting, and like, it's a one-stop shop. And so it's a different model in that sense. So like a show like Nirvana, the band, the show, which is Vice's first comedy series, was pitched to me by Matt Johnson, the creator, and we optioned it, and so they're part of Vice now. Similarly, Abandoned is one of our biggest series, documentary series, with a skateboarder named Rick McCrank, who goes around the world doing kickflips and talking to people about abandoned spaces. Really beautiful show. That was pitched to us from an external production company, and then we rolled them into the company. So, it's a different model in that sense, but we are constantly hearing pitches. I oversee the development department, which, on any given day, half their day could just be listening to pitches, reading scripts, reading treatments, and all that kind of stuff, and then we find a way to work together. But it becomes a Vice production in that sense. So, especially for young people starting out, it's a great way to get in the door. It's not for everybody because it's like of IP, but we've had some successful models for it.
Yeah, you all don't have to be directors too. Like, we
Yeah.
are looking for people who are just a researcher, and it's the foundation of all the things we do. You don't have to be like somebody who's already made a film. We can hire you and then help mentor you, and let's go further with other projects.
I think that's a really good point. On Rise, we had some really amazingly talented people who worked in many facets on the show. And so if it's something you're interested in doing and you're like, oh, but I've never directed anything, don't wait to reach out, because there could be an opportunity on a show that's exactly right for you. I threw you guys a name of a young man. I think he was in his early 20s, but he just recently immigrated from Pakistan. He spoke Urdu and a few other languages, and he came in and interviewed for one of the shows. And so, there's a lot of opportunity there if you fit the right show and you have the right skill set.
Excellent. Can I just get a time check? Okay, and until the end of the session?
Q&A.
Until the Q&A?
Oh, we got a while to go.
Okay, that's excellent. Sorry, I'm just blanking for a second here. Can somebody throw me a question? This is. Well, I'm just going to open it up a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we've kind of covered so far to begin, so I feel like sometimes...
I can talk about anything, so...
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you do acquisitions?
We don't do acquisitions, no. We like to get in on the ground floor. We have a very particular brand and tone, and that's everything from music choices to how the VO is written to how things are shot. So, it's best to come to us with something that you're just sort of in the infancy of, and that's the best way to approach us.
And when projects do come to you and they're a little bit further on, and maybe they do have a producer attached, I know you talked about that a little bit, but
That's fine, but if anything, of course, we want to know who the key creatives are and who's making it, and part of why Rise works so well is because we have an enormous amount of trust in Michelle, and she was putting us in all the right places. So we do want to know who would be running the show if we were to make it, but it's more so if you've already shot 75% of it. And I'm not saying that's a total no. I mean, if you got access to some sort of crazy cartel warlord and you had all this footage and you needed, there are exceptions, obviously. But generally, we want to start from square one.
Can I just offer that something resonated for me in this, and it was when in the trailer when the man said, when I saw Obama decide to come out on Vice and talk about federal incarceration in the United States, that same piece really affected me as well, and it really changed the way I thought about Vice in some levels, because I went to University in Montreal when Vice was a skate magazine and an urban street magazine, and I'd sort of seen Vice in that vein of things, and I quite like the skate shows and that, so that's kind of the stuff I gravitated towards on Vice. But then when I saw that piece in Obama, I was floored. I just thought it was such an excellent piece, and that's kind of, in a way, like that's what we all hope for, right? We hope to make work that actually resonates and has something to say socially and can actually help change the world. And I feel like we were able to do that with Vice. I'm really, really proud of that. Because I've been offered to work on a lot of shows that are really lame and have nothing to say. And it's full, it's all out there. And who wants to do that? You want to go to your deathbed and think, oh, I made a house repair show. Like, no, we want to make stuff that change. Like, we're an indigenous people. Like, you want to change our communities? This is a way to do it, engage. So I was really, really proud about being able to do that for my community here at Vice.
Yeah, when I saw Charlottesville, when that came out, I was like, yeah, that is going to affect people in a big way, and it went viral, as they say, and it was all over, and I think it ended up being the record of what happened there. And I think that's where some of the stuff that we can do at Vice, and skateboarding.
It's always
who doesn't like skateboarding?
And skateboarding. And weed.
It's one thing to say, you want to get excited, and I think that when you get past a document that describes a project that excites you, it's very clear. And I think that all of us as filmmakers feel like, yeah, I have an exciting idea. My idea is definitely going to get them going. But can you just break down for us, like, what do you want to see? Like, what is that thing that gets you excited?
Access is the number one thing that could kick in the door really fast. And that is,
Can you talk about what you mean by access?
Yeah, I made that cartel comment sort of as a flippant joke, but it's not totally far off, and it doesn't have to be guns and cocaine, but if you come to us and you're like, I have this story in this community, and these people are doing this crazy thing, and no one's talking about it for some reason, and I can get us in there. I mean, that is like that's a conversation starter, because that's really what we're up to all the time. All of our journalists are focusing on their own beats, whether, Ben McCoo is the gentleman you saw up there who was talking about communicating with ISIS, and he's also been spending a lot of time delving into the worlds of, the alt-right and nationalist movements and getting access there. And then we have Manisha Krishnan, who's one of our writers for Vice.com, and she's got us into following the vigilante pedophile hunters in Ontario. We ended up making a film about it. And then we have Alison Tierney, who's another Vice.com writer. She's really into drug policy, so she's finding all sorts of... So, as a company and as an editorial team, this is what we do. I was really into when I was a reporter talking to Anonymous and writing stories about Anonymous as a hacker group. And then Ben and I came together and developed a series called Cyber War, which is technically 2 seasons, but 3 seasons. And that came from a real place of just always us trying to find, okay, no one's talking about Anonymous in the right way. And so, you know, if you have that thing, if you've got that weird obsessive thing where you're just like researching some very obscure, esoteric, real world current affairs subject, and you're like, what? No one's talking about this connection. You're probably not crazy. They're probably not talking about it, and because people don't have the time to cover everything, and that's when you should come to us. At the same time, we are doing scripted. You know, we're doing scripted features. We're doing scripted television. So we are just looking for cool scripts. But if you are in the documentary space, like that's kind of the, you know.
It's also a lot of those journalists don't have the POV. They're all coming from the same kind of background, and that's why we're looking for people. If you looked at that, all people from all kinds of backgrounds who can give us different perspectives and points of view, and that's what we're really looking for.
I think that's really exciting because as Indigenous filmmakers, we have a much easier time getting that access, and we have that point of view, and it's really nice to see a broadcaster, for lack of a better word, really acknowledging the value of that, and that going straight to the source, going straight to Indigenous filmmakers to tell Indigenous stories means that the story is already going to have a certain grounding in the community and in the world and have more to say than someone who's coming in from the outside and doesn't know anything.
Yeah, like, you know, and this is not in sort of a way to take a shot at any other media outlet, but I think that, you know, we do stories on very specific topics, and we don't front load everything with preamble and context because we expect our audience to understand the basics, right? And I think you see that in Rise. Like, the tone is very much like, this is coming from an Indigenous perspective, and there are a certain set of assumptions that the audience needs to sort of get on board with in order to sort of get into the story. And when you remove that foreground, you can get to the point a lot quicker, and then you can go deeper. And I think a lot of other outlets are just sort of held back by their capital O objectivity, and obviously facts and truth are paramount to us like they would be to any other journalistic organization, but we also do lean into the subjectivity of our correspondents and our creators a bit more, and I think that's why people respond to us in the way they do.
And they also have a level of expertise, right? So for Cyber War, you know, the people who work on that team really know that. They just aren't just people who we throw in because they've had some experience. Like, Michelle knows what she was talking about with Indigenous resistance movements. It makes sense that she helms that show, not just as a director, but as a showrunner.
So all of that feels really clear to me as far as documentary is concerned, but when you're looking at expanding into the scripted space, and I know that you have done that with Nirvana the Band, the show, but what is that going to look like?
Which is a hard comparison because it's so bizarre and special.
It's totally,
and there's another show coming.
But I think that it is. There's something that does feel consistent about it, and there is a kind of like a youthful energy that feels really.
Yeah, and it looks like a doc, and it's totally bizarre, and we let them do things that I know no one else would let them do, like go into the Star Wars premiere and film the screen and then put it on television, which we did in season 1. So okay, scripted is like I always say we're in beta right now when it comes to scripted. So we got some funding earlier this year to start doing a lot of scripted features and series, and we're figuring this out ourselves. So I know it's kind of like bewildering from the outside. Generally, one of our first things is looking at our IP. So looking at all the documentaries we've been making over the past 10 years, which of these could be made into scripted films? Quite a few. Who are the creators out there in the world that we really like? Spike Jonze is heading up a lot of these big decisions on the creative side. He's very much involved with Vice.
Who's that?
Yeah, exactly. You can Google him. But you know, so you got to impress that guy, which is tough. It's doable, but it's tough. And so we're just kind of figuring it out. Like, if you think that you would pitch the project somewhere else, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but like maybe don't bring it to us. Like, try and, you know, find a tone or a character or something that looks like something that we would show in our documentaries. That's like a good way to start thinking of it. But honestly, we rebooted FUPAR, you know, like we're all over the place, so just bring us stuff.
That's interesting. I had a meeting at Vice not long ago, and I had a show, and I actually had no idea what the meeting was about. Somebody just said, "Hey, we want to come in. We
Sounds
want
about right.
We want to meet with you. We want to hear about what you're doing and what you're working on." And I was like, "Okay, I'll just go in and talk about what I've got going on." And I have a scripted show that I'm developing right now, and I realized in that meeting that
Are you pitching us right now?
no, I'm not. I'm not going to talk to you about anything specific, although I have signed the waiver. But I realized in that meeting that everything that I was avoiding in that show and everything I was avoiding in that pitch for another broadcaster is exactly what Vice wanted. Like everything I was kind of dancing around and writing around and trying to find creative ways of showing off camera was exactly what the show would be for Vice. Like
I think that's
would,
beautifully stated.
Like everything, it would just be all the terrible things that no other broadcaster would let me show would be the entire show.
You end up
And
self-censoring,
it's very exciting
right?
to
Your
think.
creativity.
Yeah, and I think that the Canadian artists in particular do that all the time, whether it's through the granting system or pitching to broadcasters, trying to appeal to really conservative audiences all over the country.
So here's
they
the
end
other
up self-censoring.
Yeah, so on that note, I mean, the thing that you should always keep in mind with us is that we make Canadian content for a global audience, full stop. So, we're always looking for stories that are going to resonate outside. All of our TV series are bought by the US. We premiered Rise in North America on the same day, and it's now gone on to our networks in Australia, France, et cetera, et cetera. So we're never just looking for the story. Like, we do that editorially, like we'll write about more localized issues or whatever, but when it comes to producing video, we're always looking at it in a global sense.
So what kind of, how do you think that filmmakers can do that? How do you think that they can kind of untether from everything that we've learned from the system as we've understood it and really say, fuck it, and develop a show that could appeal to that
Say
global
fuck
audience?
it. Just say fuck it. Just be like, this is what I want to do. It's not for anyone else, and
I think you can if you're trying to meet what you think somebody wants, it's a surefire way to fail in a way, because I think the best filmmakers are hired because of their vision and because they have something unique to say and a unique way of saying it. And so for me, as a filmmaker, I really learned a lot by doing my own films and developing my own aesthetic, coming to festivals like Imaginative, seeing work, seeing stuff from other countries. It's not just North American work, seeing other aesthetics and learning from that. And that's really helped me so that when Rise came along, which was kind of my first big commercial opportunity to work in the commercial sector, I'd mostly been making art house stuff. It opened up a lot of doors for me because I was ready and I had sort of a vision and I had a style to my filmmaking. So that's what a place like Imaginative can offer. And then you marry that now with a broadcaster or a production company like a studio that can basically get your work out there on a mass scale. Now I'm getting lots of commercial offers that I never got before because it just opened the doors, but I was ready for that opportunity. They say luck is a mixture of opportunity meets preparedness, so preparation. So I feel like that might be true.
And what was the biggest difference in making that leap from doing smaller projects that you had complete control of and more time to doing something that's so huge in scope, and also doing a project that has a tremendous amount of pressure as far as its political importance to the community?
Well, two things. I'll start with the first part. It's just way faster. It's just way, 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 way faster. So, and this is a really weird practical thing, but I would say physical stamina, actually go to the gym. I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, sitting on a filmmaking panel, but I'm serious. The physical stamina it requires to stay up, to not sleep, to be on 18 hours on your legs, carrying cameras, running around the country, getting on another plane, going to another time zone. That physical stamina, you cannot underestimate. So stop playing video games and get out running or doing whatever, because I swear I would have dropped if I was not that I'm in amazing shape, but I could handle it. So thank God. So time.
Did you get that from Tim Southam?
Tim Southam. Oh yeah.
And he has a morning workout routine that he does every single day, even the days that he's on set directing network TV. He's machine.
Yeah, Adam and I did an NSI program that was totally television that trained us for working in television. And that was actually, to be honest with you, when you asked, that was the only program I've ever done as a training program that showed me how fast you have to work when you're on sets. And I just recently came off directing my first scripted series for CBC. It's a comedy that's coming out in the new year. And it was the same thing. It was like incredibly fast, you know, shooting so fast, like 10 pages a day. And I think getting your chops so that you're fast like that and you can work under those time constraints, that says a lot, because some people crumble under that kind of pressure. So that's one thing. The other thing in terms of working with the community is that you don't use your time management. So if you know that access means that when you get to whoever you're meeting, and it means consulting with the elders and going through protocols and giving tobacco or sitting in that sweat lodge, you know, for 3 hours on a Wednesday night before you have to get up at 4 a.m. the next day to shoot, you're doing that. And because that is important to you and those relationships are important. And that's the difference when you're coming at it from an Indigenous point of view. The kind of work that has to be done behind the scenes when the cameras are not rolling, when you're there to honor the community whose stories you're telling, that's a massive part of the job. And it's something I took very seriously for Rise.
And were there some ways that Vice succeeded in supporting that part of it, that part of following those protocols and really working with the community in a way that supports the project and also supports the community?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of, there was trust, so they trusted that I would do what I needed to do to honor the communities we were in. On a very practical level, we had a budget line item which would cover items like tobacco and gifts and donations to the communities that we were in. We always tried to give back in that way. And also, I would just say that we always made sure that we didn't just show up. Like, we had associate producers and researchers who would be on the phone sometimes for months before we would arrive. So those conversations were happening very early on, and a lot of those people, most of those people, I would say 90% of the people we filmed are still in my life today. You know, we talk on Facebook or we message each other, and you know, that's something you take on when you're making documentary cinema. You take on the responsibility of those relationships.
And can you talk about, from your point of view, working with Indigenous filmmakers and what kinds of different expectations there are around engaging with the community? And have you had to do any kind of soul searching within the company, or what creative ways have you found to make room in budgets for that kind of thing? And
well, I think the budget part's the easy part, right? Yeah, you know, I think we've learned a lot from the Rise process of just the best way to engage and the best way to follow up. And I think it really does come down to maintaining those relationships before and after. And I think that can be hard when, you know, you're always moving to the next project and blah, 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 blah. And they definitely have a better sense of that after doing Rise. And, you know, I think it's all a learning process. We're in a pretty intense time around representation, who can tell what story. We're just trying to do the best job possible. We just try and keep an open ear. And I think every project we do, we learn a bit more. And, you know, I've definitely, we had a lot of different challenges to tackle with, you know, when you're making 8 films and each one is a different community. Well, we did 2 in Standing Rock, but and every issue is different, and there's different stakeholders, and there's different energy companies being challenged in different stories. And how do you represent that when you're doing but you want it to still be from the Indigenous perspective? And so there are a lot of journalistic questions that come up as well outside of the massive piece of community engagement. So, you know, it's every documentary is very, very different in that way, and you can't forget that these are real people, and you have a privilege to be able to get access and tell that story, and keeping that respect in the foreground is important.
Did you have something to add?
I think it's also important that we hire more people from the Indigenous community to work with us, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. And I think we're developing more programs as we speak, just to do more outreach in general. But we also need people to reach out to us too, and so we can start some dialogue. And
Vice is one of the partners in the Indigenous Screen Office, so
took it right out of it's better.
Steal your glory.
Yeah, no, better to come from you. But with the CMF Indigenous Studio Initiative is something that we're a signatory on, and we worked with APTN on Rise, and we were very happy about that. So 2018, we are going to be doing even more of this. this work.
Tanya, can you speak more about the internship opportunities that you mentioned briefly?
Yeah, there's some general. There's some general internship that are ongoing all the time. We work with our HR department to place students in all kinds of aspects of production. It's not just filmmaking, but there's, the social media, sales, accounting. There's internships available, and they're paid.
I was going to ask. I thought it was maybe a taboo question.
No,
they're
no.
paid
They're paid.
internships.
Yes, and there are a certain amount of time, and you have to be in a post-secondary program.
Oh, okay. Great.
I just want to debunk a myth. Every time someone finds out that I worked at Vice, they're always like, oh, they pay really badly, right? That was not my experience. And so I'm just going to debunk that because I've probably had 200 people ask me that. So I'm just throwing that out there that, this is professional work and there is a paycheck attached to it. And how amazing to get paid to do something you love. So.
Well, I think that it's a great time to move over to some questions from all of you. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah.
Yep, at the back there. Yeah, just wait for the mic.
Thank you. Hello. No? Yes?
Oh, it doesn't work. Maybe. Oh.
Okay, now it's working. Hi, I'm Jake. So my question arises when you talked a little bit about outreach programming. So that's something I'm very interested in pursuing because I work in theater. And so a lot of times I find that some things in the film industry can carry on into the theater industry in terms of representation and the types of stories that are being told. But this past summer I had a really amazing opportunity to work with youth through a thing called the Haudenosaunee Ambassador Program. And I got to meet many like-minded people out my age, which is a crazy thing to say, but I met people who were my own age. And one of the things that came out of being with this group of young Indigenous people is that there's such a lack of access to arts and film and performance and that kind of thing. So I don't know if it's a question, but I'm just want to put out there that I really support what you guys are doing in terms of wanting to get out there and support these kind of stories, because I think that's somewhere that I think my career will lead, is that I want to go back to my own community and facilitate these things so that we can have more Indigenous stories on the stage and on Vice. And so not really a question, but
No.
I hope to see more of this outreach program because that's something I really believe in.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, and it's great you're doing that work as well. So awesome. We're starting to talk to a couple partners that can help us bring the right group of youth in and who really need this sort of attention and do have challenges getting access. So it is important to us. It's like early conversation stage, but the Remix Project in Toronto is great. Not necessarily an Indigenous focus, but I'm sure they have Indigenous peoples that come through there and trying to. Jordan, what's his last name in Winnipeg? Who does the film school? He does a film school for young Indigenous students. He was just in our office a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's important to us, but we can still do a lot more for sure.
I was just going to say, also when I went to your offices to meet, there was somebody at the front desk who was bringing a group of youth from Miswaybeek, which is like an Aboriginal employment and training organization. So I was really impressed that I was coming in for this meeting, and I just happened to see that interaction happening. I was like, holy shit, these guys are serious. Like, you're actually really are kind of digging around and investigating different opportunities and groups in the community.
And I just want to say, I really appreciate your articulate response. And I also studied in theater. My background is not in film; it's in theater and theater performance. I studied at Concordia in Montreal, and I just want to say that I love film. And my parents used to tease me, like, "What are you doing all those hours sitting alone in the movie theaters?" And I volunteered for every festival. I volunteered for Hot Docs. I volunteered for TIFF, and I used to get. And I volunteered for Imaginative, and I got passes, like tickets to go see stuff. And I just saw and saw and saw. Then I started being a programmer. I started volunteering. Then I got a little internship at the box office. Then I started being a programmer. And now I've had my own work as a filmmaker be at those festivals. So, see work, be engaged, be involved in and get to know the kind of work that are at the festivals, are at the places you want to work, like Vice. And I would say that what you aspire to is totally achievable, but it does take a little bit of hustling.
Yeah. For sure. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
And I think Patrick did the same thing, and I did the same thing. Like whether you're an intern or
Oh my God, Patrick, tell how you started at Vice.
yeah.
It's not that interesting. I worked for free for a year, and yeah.
We don't do that anymore.
No, I mean, yeah, I was an editorial intern. I had my own camera, so I would I would work all day in the office, then I would go out at night and like interview bands and rappers and cut the videos at night and come in the next day and post them and just do that all the time. And then I graduated. I did this from my 4th year university while I had a full course load. And I was putting out my own magazine at the time, and then I discovered panic attacks, but figured that out. Not a joke, but it's true. And then, yeah, I just didn't leave, and I told them they had to give me a job. So they were like, you can sell ads in the magazine, and we'll pay you if you sell ads. So I was basically still making no money. And then I was the office manager for a bit, and then I did some operational jobs, but I was writing and writing and writing the whole time. And then finally, the editor-in-chief in New York was like, hey kid, like you want to come talk to me, and then he really started helping me and showed me what I needed to do, and then I oversaw the first sort of launch of any kind of daily Canadian content for Vice. So we tripled the traffic because we started doing Canadian political coverage, which we hadn't been doing at all. And then I started basically learning documentary just like in a van with a shooter and a colleague who just knew just a little bit more than me, but not a ton. And that's when we did the doc in Amgenong, and that taught me a lot about a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. So yeah, it's been 10 years and a slow climb for sure. But
Yeah, and I kind of did the same thing. I used to work at Much Music, and I started in a crappy job there, but on my after work, I'd be interviewing bands, doing, suggesting these stories, pitching them, just going out and shooting them, interviewing them myself, because it wasn't getting done. So you're going to do it, and then you become a producer, and then you get these other opportunities, but you really have to put yourself out there.
And you have to find it fun.
Yeah.
None of that was ever a bummer to me. Like I was
Exactly,
having
I
a
loved
great
it.
time.
Michael Kronish, who is an executive at Vice, he said to me, I guess like my first couple months working at Vice, he said, you're the kind of person that'll do well here, because all you have to do is like push for what you want. And he's like, just be bold about it and believe in your ideas and be passionate and just do it. Because if you sit back, like it'll just pass you by. And so I really took something away from that. And it's easy to push for what you want when you believe so much in what you're trying to say. And if you believe that you can affect change in your community, that it makes it so easy. It's not about you at all. It's about something you want to see for the world and for your community. So that's a powerful place to come from. And not everyone has that, so.
And your approach is a huge part of the reason why we have so much respect and trust in you. So it's true.
Do you have any other questions? Oh, I think at the back there, and then one down here.
Thank you so much for this panel. This is just such an incredible opportunity to hear from the folks behind this amazing work. I'm really interested in hearing a bit more about the scripted narrative feature pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I have some introduction to Pulse films.
Oh, okay, great, yeah.
Which I know in Venice is sort of an auxiliary of Vice.
Yeah, so if you don't know, Pulse is a production company that we recently bought. They put out American Honey, but they also do amazing feature documentaries on artists. Like they did the LCD Sound System film, and they also do commercials.
So I'm just curious about Vice/Pulse's relationship to indigenous scripted narrative content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, look, we're developing a slate right now, and it reminds me of a couple years ago when we first started with Viceland, where we were just throwing stuff against the wall and see what sticks. So, frankly, we're in a bit of an experimental phase right now, and like we're just looking for the creators to come in with the conviction and expertise that can sell us on something. So it's not much of a brief, I know, and it's like a pretty wide target. But it's also kind of exciting, and we tend to follow our gut, but we also have a lot of data about what our audience likes, and so it's like that mixture of, hey, we don't think there's anything like this, and we think we can do this uniquely well because we know our audience is into this. That's sort of the formula. So really, I mean, it is a huge part of the scripted pitching. It's like, well, I've seen a lot of Vice documentaries. I know they cover this, but I've never seen a scripted show about that kind of thing. And wow, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, I'm involved in a negotiation right now to develop a scripted series with Vice.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's based on a book, like an existing property. But the book is like literally there was, like, to be quite honest, probably two places we could have brought that, and that was Amazon and Vice, like, you know, and there nobody was going to take this because it's just too out there, but it's very exciting and there's a lot of diversity. And so I think if you really, that is a really good benchmark, is to be like, well, where else could I take this and where would it fit? And I think if it's bold, I think you can, you know, yeah, and this is a very genre based piece of work. So
there's a question down in the front here.
First off, I'm a huge fan of you both, of Rise and Firesong. I saw it back at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, which I work for now, and yeah, it was a pretty awesome to see that film. Yeah, it meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just going back to the thing that you spoke about earlier about censorship when you're writing. I find that as a screenwriter myself, I've shied away from a lot of the truths, especially since most of my writing comes from an experience level and things that I've gone through in life. So as creators, how have you pushed past that sort of struggle with being completely honest and real with what you're saying with your work without feeling sort of slighted or worried about the way that it's going to come off to a wider audience, not necessarily just a specifically a specific type of person or somebody who would view that. I mean, I find that I've had conversations with other young creatives who I'm friends with before, where we talk about constantly trying to be unapologetically Indigenous through our work, always, without needing our reasons to back it up, just with knowing that's from our experience and from where we're coming from. And that's sort of something that I've struggled with, and I liked that you sort of touched on that a bit, because I find that the more that I write and the more that I create, it's something that I keep trying to do. So I'm just curious, through your work, how you've sort of pushed past those feelings of trying to make things more accessible for a wider audience, when in reality maybe it's okay if a story is just for a certain type of person or a certain type of experience, you know? I don't know if you can speak on that a bit. I don't know if I really was articulate enough to make sense, but...
I just think it's amazing that you and your peers are having those conversations about making content that's unapologetically Indigenous now. I think that that's something that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, filmmakers weren't really having a conversation in that way. I know that's not the way that we were talking about it 5 or 10 years ago. I know when I was making Firesong, I did a lot of dancing around trying to figure out how to convince people that somebody was going to want to make a film and hear a story about suicidal teenagers and queers living in a remote northern reserve. And that's a feedback that I got all the time, was oh, we really like the story, we really like the script, nobody wants to see this movie, nobody wants this story told. And I kind of felt but I do. And so I mean, in answer to that, I really did a lot of work on the script to make aspects of the structure really appealing to somebody who's coming from a very traditional kind of filmmaking background. And then when that film was finished and it went to TIFF and was successful in a number of different ways, and I had to start writing something again, I found that I just couldn't do it. And I hit a wall because I just felt I don't know what to write now. And I felt I had ideas for things that I could get made, and I didn't want to do them because I was well, that's the project that can get made, but it's not the project that I want to make. And so I just had this little council of Indigenous filmmakers in my head, and you were one of them, that I was thinking, like, what would I be really excited about if I heard that Michelle was working on or Danis was working on? And when I started to think about like what I was excited about the work that my peers were doing, that's when the ideas started to come that felt like they were really me in a way. And I know that that's like a weird kind of backdoor answer, but it's like I had to go through like the imagination of my peers in order to give myself permission to make something that I felt like nobody's going to want to make this, but I want to make this, so that's the direction I'm going.
And I just want to add to that, you have to speak your truth, you know? It's like you're a storyteller because only you can tell a story from your perspective. Someone else could try to tell the same story, it's going to come out differently. So you have to speak your truth and not worry around that, you know? And that's what makes an amazing filmmaker who has vision and has a voice. And there's lots of time for the outside influences, for the network notes and the story editor suggestions and the producers who just want one little word changed. You know, there's going to be lots of that. But at the essence of it comes from you, and you have to speak your truth. And it's funny that Adam brings up this idea of being excited, because when I finished Rise, I felt dead. I was so physically and mentally exhausted. I'd given everything. And that's an amazing feeling. But I was like, I don't think I'll ever make a film again. But a famous filmmaker that I really admire said to me, oh, you'll feel like that after every big project. And literally I waited until something excited me. And the next thing that excited me happens to be the scripted series that, you know, I'm negotiating a development deal with Vice right now on. And it's like, I always listen for, like, what is my truth, and when do I get excited, and what makes me go, I can spend 5 years of my life or 2 years of my life giving everything to this. Because if you're like, I kind of like it, it's not worth it. You got to take time away from your family and your friends and your life, and why would you want to do that for something you're not willing to bleed for, you know? And Jesse brought up a really good point on the earlier panel this morning, and I just want to echo it here right now. He said, we can't have physical or political sovereignty without our narrative sovereignty. We have to own our stories as Indigenous people, because that's where our history lies and that's where our futures lie. And so I really believe that we can hold our narrative sovereignty, you know, in these moments. Now is the time. So I leave you with Jesse's words, not mine. I'm just paraphrasing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There's one here on the side.
Okay. I'm just curious where you're at with 360 and immersive media.
Oh, yes, great. I totally have an answer for you. So last year we did a VR project which was an offshoot of the film we made last year when we went to Shoal Lake 40 with Trudeau, called Cut Off, and it premiered here. It was at VIF and a couple other places. Since then, we've done a couple other initiatives. We did a thing with Google about nuclear power, which was like pretty cool. We used these really interesting stereoscopic cameras to go inside the Durham power plant and met people that are affected in the area. And it's like a really neat kind of nerdy thing. And we have the biggest VR project that Vice has ever done coming out of the Canadian studio next year about jaguar conservation in Brazil. Super ambitious. It'll be interactive. We're using photogrammetry, which is basically like if you come in here and took like 1,000 photos of the room, you could then make a 3D model of the room and then literally walk around it, and then you could put like the microphone on the ground and make it a 3D map, and you could pick up the microphone like in VR. So we're doing this stuff to tell a narrative story. So these projects are exhausting to like craft, and we're lucky in Canada to have partners like TELUS and the CMF that will help fund these things. So with Jaguars, we did it through the CMF experimental strand. So we're always interested in ideas. We have a really great partner in Occupied VR. They're a VR studio that's basically full of mad scientists and game designers and programmers. It's my favorite place to hang out. And so we're always interested. It's very expensive, but we have been getting some experience and expertise in the field. So we're able to produce, but it's a pretty low volume of projects because is it complicated? Yeah.
Any other questions? as you're talking about this and talking about so many projects that are really difficult and other media entities wouldn't touch, I'm just wondering, why is it that you've been able to do that when other entities haven't? Like, where is the money coming from, and like how have you been successful in this way? Because these are expensive, ambitious, difficult projects.
Well, I think firstly, I think audiences are changing, and I was thinking about that when you were asking your question. I mean, everyone has a different truth to speak, and I think audiences are more and more interested in hearing those truths, whether they're coming from an Indigenous perspective, a Black perspective. Like, there's an awareness that there has been a deficiency in diversity in voices, and I think that especially young audiences know when they're being given something that's kind of, neutered, for lack of a better word. So that's part of it. I think also just Vice has attracted the interest of investors and partners in the media space who maybe feel like their relevance is drying up and see what we're doing and building this audience and want to invest in it. So that's been sort of the success on the commercial side. And then internally, we work with people like Michelle who are just genuinely passionate about this stuff. I'm a very passionate person, and like I'm always following, even though I'm at an executive level, like I always have a few projects that I'm very hands-on with that I personally develop, that I write. So it just comes from that sort of insanity that we have of like, we really, really care, and people just seem to want to give us money to do that. So it's a good formula.
It's a very good place to be.
Yeah.
Also, Vice is over 20 years old. It's been doing this for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only in the last 5 years that all this influx of money has been coming, but they've been working on interesting stories for over 20 years, so it's not just like they came out of nowhere and started doing these things.
Exactly.
When you, I'm just going to ask another question, but does anyone have one? Oh, go ahead.
Do you have any advice for young filmmakers? I've got my students here today about how to get started, or sort of a way in, because some of them are budding filmmakers.
Well, it's like we were talking about, like our internship opportunities, researcher jobs. That's a really good place to start. Not to be shy to reach out even for like a 15-minute coffee chat. Like, I'm happy to do that kind of thing. Watching a lot, like Michelle was saying earlier, is like very, very important. Pitching Vice requires a knowledge of Vice. I would say 75% of people we meet sort of try and fake it, and that's young and old. Or like, what's your favorite Vice show? They're like, well, I read this article in the magazine 20 years ago. I was like, that's not what I asked you. And that's the best way to be educated. It's something that, I've spoken to executives in this country where I'm like, hey, did you go to this film festival? Oh, no. I don't get that. Like, you always have to be keeping up with what's going on, and that just means you're educating yourself. You can have intelligent conversations about state of culture, state of film, what stories are being told, and just be curious, and like, don't be afraid to knock on doors, and don't be weird about it. I always say, don't email me, then DM me to say you emailed me, but it's just, just be present, educate yourself, and don't be afraid to reach out. You'd be surprised what one email to the right person can get you, so.
Yeah, be hungry, be curious, and I think, and do your research. Like, put some effort into it. Like, we're gonna make the effort to meet you, you gotta make the effort to meet us, so you have to work at it.
I think
it takes hard work.
Curiosity is such a big one. I've always, like, when I was working with our host on Rise, I was like, if you can just be curious, like, you've done 50% of the job. If you can just be curious, always remember, even when you're tired, be curious. Want to know. You meet the most boring person you've ever sat across from. What can you find what's really interesting about them? Can you bring that out of them? That's exciting. Everyone has a story. Everyone has something special to offer. Sometimes you just have to look or dig a little. And I would say, like, as someone as a content creator, if, like, you're interested in telling stories, don't go to the obvious places. Like, I mean, look at me. I'm an old lady. I read Teen Vogue. Like, Teen Vogue is where it's at right now for me.
Rules.
I love Teen Vogue. And the thing is, so, like, go to just don't go to where you're expected to go. Reach out beyond your comfort zones. I brought a Teen Vogue home the other day, and my sisters made fun of me. They're like, you're too old to be reading that. But, like, go to where it's not expected of you, and sometimes great gifts will come from that.
I would also add, I think that the best resources that you have is the people who are around you. I think the sooner you can find your community of peers and not care what anyone else is doing and just get really interested and really curious about what each other are interested in, support one another, and go out and make a ton of stuff. Because a lot of filmmakers spend a lot of time looking up. So trying to find those people who are broadcasters or like older filmmakers or whatever. And the reality is the more you can support one another, that's the thing that's going to sustain you over time and support your career and bring you forward.
I think that's amazing advice. And everyone has that voice in their head, whether it's what does this broadcaster think? What is my mom going to think? What is so-and-so going to think if I make this story, if I tell this story? And I was trying to think of an answer when you asked that question, but I think you nailed it. Like if you have that peer group to replace that voice, whatever that voice is for you, you will go so much further and you'll be so much more confident.
If you're interested as a director too, like I went and saw Kiarostami talk at TIFF, and he said, or maybe it was Herzog, one of the two, and he said, read books. Like, it's great to watch movies, but read books, because books, they make you imagine the pictures. And if you're a director, that's basically what you do. You get a script and you have to imagine the pictures and stick the camera and the actors how you imagine your pictures. So reading is a great resource too, I think.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Or Daniel, are you edging up to the front for? Okay. Do we have time for one more? Yeah. All right. Do we have another question?
Read more books. Having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card.
Yeah, this is the Toronto Public Library also has the Criterion Collection, which you can access for free with the library card. Speaking of
I
library
used
cards,
to
it's
rent
so great.
Criterion movies from the U of T libraries and then just burn them. So I had them all on my computer. Yeah.
You have one of my Criterion movies.
I do.
Not returned.
I know.
All right,
I gotta burn it and I'll give it back to you.
You can settle that in the hallway.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, for that really valuable information for everyone in the audience, and thank you for coming to our last session of the Industry Series today. Thank you. We return tomorrow at 9:30 down in the Learning Studios with Breaking the Mold, Developing Narrative Indigenous Models, which should be really great, featuring Warwick Thornton, whose Sweet Country is playing tonight. So come on out.